She grew up pretty smart. You did a pretty good job with that one. Well, that is all you can do. Um, Everybody gets to the point where they have to make up their own mind about what they believe. Between being younger and becoming your own person as an adult, independent. Which is why when I said, I think 2 weeks ago, Mother's Day, when I was talking about my approach, Laura and I's approach to raising our boys as far as what we wanted to communicate, it wasn't Bible, 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 Bible. I mean, the Bible is important, yes. It's the basis of our understanding of God along with the Spirit. But the honesty that we really did do the things that we proclaimed. That was what I wanted them to see. And even Joshua being out of the church, I talked to him quite a bit about the, I won't say the Lord, but spiritual things and his attitude. And that's the consistent feedback from him is, oh no, it was very clear you and mom believed exactly what you were saying. And there was no, we're not perfect, but there was no inconsistency in the big things in life or, uh, you know, this is the front we present. There was none of that. So he knows it was genuine. There's no doubt in his mind it was genuine. And that's probably the best thing you can just continue to do. I'm assuming you've been doing that. So, I mean, I know you well enough to think that. Uh, So are you open? Are you open to some honest feedback? Okay. You made a very large deal about that growing up with your family, and it was very obvious to the whole church. I mean, we've been in church together 25 years, brother. Um, it's a real little thing because sinners are going to sin. They're going to, and we're not perfect. We sin too, right? That's why we need forgiveness. You made a huge deal out of that. That's why they're. I'm not surprised at all that they're making a big deal out of that because it's something you made a big deal about. So they're pointing it back at you, right? I don't mean to be harsh. I'm just being honest and truthful. And if their heart is hard, that's really just an excuse. It's just an excuse for them to not address whatever the real issue is of why they don't believe or want to follow the Lord. You know, both those boys were baptized, into the church at one point, and they're probably just hanging their hat on that because you made a big issue of it early on, but it's not the real issue. The real issue is with them and between them and God. Whenever we're witnessing, the real issue isn't, we can get in the way and be a bad witness and be a stumbling block for sure. But in spite of all of us at times being stumbling blocks, we all ended up here serving the Lord. In spite of all the influences in my life being stumbling blocks, and I didn't grow up in a Christian home, but the people I knew that were in the Lord uh, weren't perfect and aren't perfect. And despite all that, I still ended up here, and so did you. So you got to know it's just an excuse. It's not. It's not that that's the thing that's keeping them from the Lord. Although they may want you to believe that that's what it is. It's just the excuse for the underlying issue, which is between them and God. Not that you can't help in that, but just get past that. Maybe you'll get to the real issue. Maybe not. Maybe they don't want to let you in. I think something that helped me with Joshua, my younger boy, is always being willing to accept wherever he was coming from, right? Preachers' kids, you think they don't have some pressure? You know, you guys say they're just kids and that they shouldn't behave any differently than the rest of the kids. But that's not what you believe. They're preachers' kids. They're supposed to behave better than everybody else. So that's the pressure they had, and they knew it. They talked to us about it. And I just keep telling them, you're just like all the rest of the kids. There's nothing, just like preachers' wives, too, right? Her job is to help me in my ministry. That's what Scripture says. That's all. That's all it says, is my wife. That's all it says. But do you guys does a congregation put demands on a preacher's wife? Yeah, just the whole family. So is it fair? No. Is it the reality? Yes, it's the reality. So um, they would, I see your hand, so let me finish my thought here before I lose it. So they would come and, talk to me about that. And no matter where they wanted to go with that, whether they wanted to, as long as it wasn't unscriptural or sinful, I was all ears, right? And then when they made bad choices, you still have to be all ears and understanding and empathetic and not jump down their throat and tear their head off, because you've probably done it in your life or something similar. So we're in the same boat. That kind of parenting, I think, is more detrimental, because then the kids respond with, well, I'm not telling mom or dad that again because I needed a solution and all I got is static. So, that the incident that led to Josh leaving, he doesn't see Laura and I, as being culpable, because when they called at 2 a.m., I went and picked him up, and he said it was worse because we didn't give him a lecture about being drunk and all that. And even the next day when he got up, he's hungover. Back in the day, I was there, and that's the last thing you need is for somebody to yell at you. But he knew. I mean, if they know they're wrong, then why are you going to push the issue unless you're trying to release your anger on them? And really, what are you angry at? Are you angry at them for their failure? Well, we better expect our children to fail. Or are you angry at yourself for not doing something different to help prevent it? And usually it's angry at yourself. So that's all the more reason why you don't want to take that out on your children. And you want to dismiss yourself from, if you can't not do that, then you need to excuse yourself long enough to get yourself under control to get into that mindset. So I'm talking general parenting here for everybody as well. But you're dealing with two grown adults, and it's a little different, but you're still their dad. They still look at you like their dad. So that's going to be the way it goes. They're going to expect a different answer from you versus everyone else in the world because you're their dad. And same with Val as their mom. The two sides of the coin there. Comment or question? You had your hand up. Oh, yeah. 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 Deacon's kid. Yeah. Yeah, and you don't deserve that, especially when you're young. You didn't sign up for that, and my wife didn't sign up for that, I guess. Well, she kind of did because we're married, and was it? She didn't really sign up for it. We had our own plans before the Lord got involved. Not that we're not happy about it. Don't take that the wrong way. It's just the way it is. So beyond what Holly, your very wise oldest daughter, told you, beyond praying for them and just keeping the lines of communication open and not being offended by their behavior. I mean, there's a certain line they cross as another person in your home, obviously, you know, uh, and the rules differ between homes. But I don't know that if my rules didn't change all that much because I didn't have a whole lot of rules when Josh was living with us and Nikki before she was a church member. I think because I just have minimum rules, and not that I don't get annoyed by some things. Of course, we all do. The shoe rack in the playroom's got to go. Okay, I've been waiting 2 months to say something. That's a little thing. I'm just kidding. I do want it to go, but I'm not annoyed by it. It's just a shoe rack, right? And that's the other thing you got to remember is that things in appearances are not as important as people. That's the thing. People are more important than anything, right? So it doesn't matter how it looks to anybody else. Especially when your kids are little, same thing. When I was a new parent, because I didn't grow up in a big family. Laura grew up in a slightly large family with 14 brothers and sisters, so she had a leg up on me big time. She's the second oldest too. Me, I've got one brother, and one had one niece that was little when I left home, Navy bound. So I had no experience with little kids, and I would get it's got had my idea about how kids ought to be. It was so wrong. So now the things that used to just drive me up the wall, I see Freya living with us doing it, and I just laugh. I think that's cute. Now I get it. I know why grandparents and parents that are experienced, they don't get upset. If she wants to have a meltdown in the store, it's not a reflection on you as a parent. It's a reflection of she's 3 and hasn't learned, even just despite. Yeah, that's a bad plan too. That just teaches them to throw a fit to get what they want. So where I was going with all this, Ken, is that we're still learning because we're in a stage now with older adult children that, number one, every relationship is going to be totally different with them. Where when you're younger, there's more standardization. Not that they're not unique. I mean, they are. And we learned hopefully that there's no one way to parent all kids. You parent all your children a little bit differently based on what they respond to, right? I mean, you were telling me that the other day, Justin, that I forget which one it was. One of your kids, you just look at and they melt, and the other one, you might have to get the rod of correction out and be a little harder on them, Huh. I'm not naming names. No, I'm not silly. So they all have a different temperament. So I can't answer you to either of the boys because you know their temperament and you know what's gonna work. But keep the lines of communication open and the judgmentalism down. Because remember, what are you judging them on? We're not supposed to judge those that are outside, according to 2 Corinthians. We're supposed to judge those that are inside. We're not. Why would we judge the world? Yes, ma'am. That is a good perception. Yeah, it doesn't have to be legitimate. And some people aren't going to let you in, and then you just pray for them and ask the Lord to send somebody that they will. I mean, there's somebody to witness to them. Everybody can't be a witness to everyone. That's not how it works. That's not how. That's why the Lord made a body, and the body has different parts and pieces, and different responsibilities. We just spent some time going through that recently. So I am incapable of having, a good witness with certain people in my life because of a variety of reasons. You would think, well, you're a pastor. Oh, that doesn't mean anything. And you know that. I mean, you should know that. So, then you want to direct your prayers to bringing that person into their life and making them receptive. That that's what your heart. You might have to wait a long time too. Long time. I think of Miss Deanna and Brother Hal when he first came to the church, and I know she's listening. So we miss you. Hurry back. I think you got your second shot here. She had been hurt and was out of church when Hal first came to this church. And every time we asked for prayer requests, he would ask for prayer for her, prayer for her, prayer for her, prayer for her. It took a while, but it was the Lord changing her heart that made all the difference in the world. And the prayers, I believe, moved that along. How else can I believe that? Scripture says there, the fervent prayers of a righteous man availeth much. Very effective. You had your hand up, bro.
Oh, it was something about time, things taking time. It was not a part of this body, but my uncle played in like a hard rock. My uncle Tim played in a hard rock punk rock band from the time I was like
What does that mean?
0.
Be careful treading on that ground.
He had really cool hair.
It's the first time Sarah met me. I was playing in a hard rock.
It's not necessarily that. It's just his lifestyle. I don't think was
Yeah.
necessarily the lifestyle of a believing follower of God. And he now is like in his 50s, very dedicated to the Lord. And his wife isn't. They're completely not different ends of the spectrum at all, but she doesn't go to church. But I mean, that happened later in his life, much later in his life. And I think that, like the pastor was saying, it takes time and like that self growth or the desire to have self growth that can't be imputed into you. It kind of has to come from within you. That's really hard. And the second thing that I was just thinking about that I can't not bring up in this situation is something that I've learned from like a lot of the leadership literature that I've been reading from the military community. This guy has something he calls conform to influence, and it sounds like the opposite of what you should do. Is like, oh, here's all this behavior that all this group of people is doing. It's terrible and it's bad. I'm gonna come in. I'm gonna tell them how wrong they are, and I'm gonna show them just how wrong they are, and then they're all gonna change. Not how it works, and that's how everybody pushes a leader out of the situation. What he means to do in that situation is like become a part of the group so that they trust you and they see value in you in things other than telling them how their behavior should be. Like maybe going fishing with them, doing things together with them, so you gain their trust back. Because it seems like there might be a trust thing. You go, but yeah, conform to influence is like you have a veritable place in their life and they trust you, and then they actually look at your witness like, wow. I think it's kind of happened in my workplace. We had really bad language in the service bays and near customers and all the time when I first started there with a few people being part of the group and showing our witness to other people. It completely changed the dynamic where we work.
Well, that just doesn't have to be witness. That kind of language and behavior is just not professional in any environment.
At first, we were really hardcore, like yelling down people's throats about like how that's not right. We shouldn't be doing that, and it really didn't change because of that. It changed because we
Well, and just to expand to general witnessing in general, the days, and I did a bunch of it years ago, knocking on doors, and of course that's when I was teaching the Romans Road and Four Spiritual Laws and all that other garbage that I don't believe is true anymore. Um, but the goal is to make disciples, not, the Bible doesn't say win people to Jesus. It says make disciples. Go make disciples. And what is a disciple? Well, a disciple isn't someone that just believes in Jesus. Disciple is someone that is actively following the Lord and learning now. It takes time. In order to get to that place, to have any kind of credence with the other person, you have to build a relationship first. So that takes an investment on your part of time and maybe money, maybe resources. And then when you have that, then you have to find out where they're at in that regard so you know where to start. Some of us will never get past the first part because we're not going to get the credence that we need to be effective with certain groups of people and certain people in our lives that and I think your family is the hardest nut to crack, to be honest with you, because I've known you your whole life. That little TJ. You remember when?
I'm still not even an adult.
Well, right. Me neither. And I'm, 56. Am I an adult, Mom? I think she's watching today, so. If she chimes in, let me know if she thinks I'm an adult, because sometimes I wonder. So, meeting people where they're at, certainly, and letting people be who they are. That's part of my message this morning, next hour. But letting people be who they are. There's no cookie cutter mold. So many groups try to fit you into a cookie cutter mold. I remember early on in a church that Laura and I went to when we were first married. This guy came into services, and he was tatted and pierced and leathered, and the typical, prototypical, what you might think of, at least in that day, is degenerate, right? And then it doesn't work like that anymore. There used to be a different stigma on the whole tatted thing and pierced thing. So I'm talking like 90, okay, before you were born. So no comments from you. Oh, darn it. Anyways, the stigma was still there, and a couple weeks later, he was saved, as we say back then, and he walks down the aisle in a suit, and all the piercings are out. And I'll never forget, the preacher goes, "He even looks saved." What does that look like? That's what he said, that right from the pulpit. That stuck with me for a lot of years. There is no looks like that. Acts like that, yes. Looks like that, no. I think guys that think like that, people that think like that, if they go back to ancient times, they would be shocked. Right? Shocked. We've studied enough together to know that's certainly the case. Kenny's still not back, so I guess I can move on. That's a pretty decent topic. Any comments or questions on that? Thank you for your input, TJ and Holly. Justin? No? You didn't leave me enough time to start another lesson. That was tactical on your part, wasn't it?
I appreciate the conversation, though, because when we talk with the boys, we have to explain that the way we believe now is not the way we believed a long time ago, that we have learned and we've grown and we've seen that what we believed a long time ago was wrong and we need to change. And I think it helps them to see that we're real people and that we can accept that there is a need for change.
Well, that's the only consistent thing in the life of a messianic is change. And it's the one thing that humans generally are opposed to. They like to be settled. So it's a very unsettling kind of life for most people until you get used to it. Then it becomes an adventure.
I think that's also one of the reasons that children in the age that those boys are right now kind of rebel against their parents because
Oh yeah.
as you get into those late teen years and early 20s, not only are you more confident and headstrong, at least from the males I've ever met, that's how we are, but you also see that your parents are human and that your parents are capable of mistakes, and then you start to like backlog all of these transactions you had with them. You're like, they were wrong back then and I was right. And you kind of start confirming in your mind everything you were always right about. Yeah. So I mean, like that.
They got this righteous indignation about how they were wronged.
They were wronged. Yeah, they could have had a better life somewhere else, right?
Yeah, and then they
Really?
poke at that, and that they keep going back to, how it was back then, and it's a very interesting.
Wow.
Yeah, I don't walk away from it, but I'm like, you got some really strong feelings about that, don't you? Yeah. Listen, I grew up with you. I lived it.
Yeah, you were there too.
Fortunately, there were speakers in the bathroom, so
Oh. Well, the fortunate part is they're only one way.
I guess part of the reality as I was contemplating is one of the things that stands out in my mind, but I'm having a hard time figuring it out, but it exists, is what they put back on me as my hypocrisy.
Sure. Well, like I said, that's what they're. I mean, that's probably easy, and the anger stems from the process we just described. You were out. He said, when you get into that age range, you start questioning everything. And then you come to the realization eventually that your parents are just people just like you, and then you start to grow to being equal to them. You're not there then, but I was brilliant when I was 21. I was brilliant. I knew everything. You just asked me, I would tell you. As I've gotten older, I've gotten a lot dumber, and I realize that I know less now than I knew then. The reality is, it's just attitude, right? Things that I had figured out when I was 21, I'll never get figured out in this life. But it's taken time and wisdom to come to the place where you can admit that you don't have to have all the answers. So they're in the age range where they're going through that. So on one hand, mom and dad were idiots, and this goes for everybody. And I'm gonna make up my own mind. So I need to seek some new information. And when you seek new information, there's a lot of it now. Oh my gosh, you can have any ism you want. I tried to establish Joeism for a while, but Joeism didn't work too well because Joe would probably be dead by now with Joeism, because it's pretty much do whatever Joe wants to do. That didn't work out for me. So then I there's Hollyism, there's Emmyism, Davidism, Paulism. Yeah. It's my own personal belief system, right? That's Joeism. Well, correct. You can mix and match. That's why we have 50,000 denominations, by the way. We can mix and match. The problem with that is that truth by definition is singular, and Jesus either was who he said he was, or he was nuts. There's no in between, because the claims he made are so outrageous that he was either correct and he was God in the flesh, or he should have been in a mental institution. So once you get to that, maybe they decided the latter, that he was nuts and it's all a big sham, and we're brainwashed. Well, I would say, well, where are you going to go from there? Because you're left with nothing at that point. And that's the conversation I would have. Well, what do you think? Are they adopting another God, another philosophy? Well, then you think about that. Or are they going to become agnostic? Agnostic is really a lazy atheist. They don't really want to admit that they don't believe in God. They're hedging their bets. Yeah, I don't really believe God has any bearing on anything, but there's probably a God. That's an agnostic. They're just hedging their bets. Atheists are bolder, and they actually usually are pretty articulate. I have a lot of respect for atheists because all the atheists that I've ever talked to have very developed ideas and sound logical ideas. I mean, you might think that's very strange coming from a gospel preacher, but anybody that can present a logical, well thought out argument, I respect, even if I disagree with them. And when it really comes down to it, is they want proof. I mean, I've got a really good friend that was a pastor for 20 years who's an atheist, and he basically educated himself out of his beliefs and believes that he holds some of the similar ideas because he was in a very strict, very fundamental home growing up. They he's told me stories like, oh man, I wonder.
He said he lost it in seminary.
Cemetery? Yeah. No, he went about, yeah, Danny, you know who I'm talking about. But probably 10 years after that, he did do ministry work. He never, we've talked long about this, and it was years later until he really could feel like he could investigate what he ended up investigating. But my point was, I really respect him because he's got well thought out, logical arguments as to why he believes what he believes. And if your kids end up there and they're happy, I mean, as a parent, not as one of God's people, as a parent, you got to be happy they're happy. You got to be happy they feel fulfilled, but you ache because you want to see them in the next age. You want to see him with the Lord in the next age. And I get it. I've got one of my own, I just keep praying for him. I keep talking about whatever he's thinking about in his head. And, some things make sense and some things don't make sense. And when they don't, I point out to him, well, what about this? Well, that requires, brothers and sisters, for you to do your thinking. That's the problem, because you guys know me. I love the hard questions. I'm going to answer the hard question. All the ones that a lot of the other preachers that I know avoid, I want an answer. There's got to be an answer, right? It's either a language misunderstanding or, the Bible's not a science book in certain places, and there's an answer. Now, I'm not saying I have them all, but I love that. So I think about that kind of thing. And some of the things Josh has brought up to me were things that I've thought through and maybe even swerved in that area for a little while considering it. I mean, if you don't consider the opposite opinion, you really don't have a well-formed opinion. Yeah, this book, if you can't take this book and balance it against all the science of the day and balance it against the politics of the day and everything in your life, what good is it? It's not a dead book. Sure, it was written 1,500 years ago or put together 1,500 years ago, but it's relevant for today. And if you don't believe that, then why are you reading it? And if you read it and it doesn't make sense, why, if you think it's that important, don't you spend the time to research the things that you feel like are contradictory? See, you should be spending your time thinking about the hard things. Did the sun really stand still at Joshua's command? Was it really a 48-hour day? The sun stood still for 12 hours, is what it says, 36 hours. Wow. Is there any evidence of that? Actually, there is. So go online and do some research, and you'll find that there is. You have a comment, Emmy?
Going back to what you said about whether Jesus resurrected or not, it reminded me of a passage that I cannot find where Paul talked about that, of our belief of, well, we believe what we believe, and if God really didn't, come back, then where's the body? Where
You're talking about 1 Corinthians 15 or all men most miserable, blah, blah, blah. Blah, blah, blah. I shouldn't say blah, 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 but Jesus was seen of over 500 people at one time, and, last of all, me.
What you were just saying just reminded me of that, so.
See, I think the part that you're 13, but if there's no resurrection of the dead, not even Christ has been raised. And if Christ has not been raised, then our preaching is in vain. Your faith also is in vain. Moreover, we are even found to be false witnesses of God, because we witnessed against God that he raised Christ, whom he did not raise, if in fact the dead are not raised. For if the dead are not raised, not even Christ has been raised. And if Christ has not been raised, your faith is worthless. You're still in your sins. Is that what you're referring to? Yeah. Right, it's an all or nothing proposition. He either was or he wasn't. It's either really important or it's not important at all. There's no in between. Yes, sir.
I'm kind of having trouble on a word. Where it says, I understand the word.
Which verse?
Job chapter 3 verse 9.
You're changing topics.
Sorry.
That's okay. Anybody have anything else? We have about 5 minutes left, and I'm going to try to answer Dave's question. Anybody have any other comments or questions about what Kenny brought up? And, really parenting, witnessing is kind of the theme, I guess. Thank you, by the way. That was a good discussion. All right. So, Job, you want to go to Job?
I don't really quite understand.
Have you been reading Job because you need a job?
Funny joke.
What chapter?
So it's chapter 3 verse 9, and it's about what his wife said. And it says, then his wife said unto him, dost thou still retain thine integrity? Curse God and die.
Verse 9?
Yeah.
Chapter 2. Okay. I was like, man, I'm in 3. I'm not reading that. Okay.
I still don't quite fully understand integrity. I mean, I know the definition of it, but I don't really know what it really is, or I'm getting confused by it. That word can mean a few different things, but if you look at it in this context, we're talking about his integrity in following
Donuts.
like this table right here. Pretty kind of faulty, right?
Hey.
It's not very structural. It doesn't have structural integrity. It's gonna fall. It's gonna collapse pretty easily. If I jump on top of this, do you think it'll stand very well? It doesn't have integrity. This thing is pretty solid. It has strong structural integrity. So I think that the way they're using that word in that context is like his integrity is kind of like his foundation of belief in God. And she's saying, after all that happened to Job and their family, you still stand on that foundation because all the bad stuff happened to him. You still stand strong on your foundation of God. That's what does that make any more sense if you look at it like that? Sort of. But also, I'm trying to figure out why is that word there when it's for me, I just don't really understand why.
Because God took his riches, killed his family, allowed, right. Okay. Yep. Allowed his family to be subject to the adversary, allowed his riches to be subject to the adversary. Imagine having a large family Imagine if you and your sister died. Do you think your mother would be in pretty good shape? Your mother might go to Paul after calamity after calamity after calamity, personal and severe as it gets. And her faith might be shaken to the point, and I doubt this is not true of you, Megumi, but a person's faith could be shaken to the point where they said, why are you still believing in that? That's really what she's saying. Yeah.
I was trying to lump it in with this because of the fact that they're doing the same, or not doing the same exact thing, but they're asking him for at least walking away because of what they're seeing. Wouldn't it be, or would it not be?
He's saying my brothers are behaving like Job's wife.
Yeah.
I get that.
Yeah.
They did not have, their integrity is not what it would eventually stand on.
Interesting enough, the Barak there is what they translated curse, and it means to kneel, and you can curse or bless. Kind of interesting. But she's saying to give up, yeah. Why are you still holding on to God? Look what God's done to you, or maybe has not protected you from, which would be truer. Does that help? You sure?
I'm more so thinking. Never mind.
Okay. All right, let's take 15 and we will come back to have some singing and then a message. Would you like to close us in prayer, TJ?
Father, thank you for bringing us together today, and thank you for the conversation this morning. I know it's not the best of circumstances that brings up this conversation this morning, but it's definitely needful knowledge being imparted to everyone today. Good wisdom in those words, and something we need to think about as we witness to other people in their lives. Thank you for each member here of the body that is willing to come and worship you today, and I pray that it would be a pleasing aroma to you.
Amen. Yeah.
In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. All right, see ya in 15.